Greetings, everyone. Brad here with Mild Mannered EDC, and today we're going to do a review of this relatively new offering from Kershaw. It is a traditional slip joint called the Culpepper. That's right. There you go. Interesting. Good-looking knife, I think, at least for the most part, if you're into traditional style-looking knives. And it was kind of cool to see Kershaw doing something like this year. And they've done a couple other versions of the, well, not other versions, but a couple other slip joint knives this year, and I'll throw some pictures up of those. So, it's just part of their lineup. I thought that was cool. Little throwback to their past. Kershaw was one of those early brands that I certainly remember from my days as a young lad. And certainly these kind of knives come back, and some of the shapes on this knife, some of the design elements speak to me from back in the day. So yeah, it was cool, and I'm glad I've picked this up and I'm able to take a look at it and share it with you all today. We're going to do a relatively standard, mild-mannered classic review on this. So we'll talk blade, we'll talk action, a little different here with slip joint. Then we'll talk, handle, scale, materials, and then carry. Yeah. But yeah, so let's go ahead. Let's do quick. Let's talk specs real quick. We've got a blade length here of 3.25 inches. A cutting length on that blade of 3 inches, right on the money. We've got a handle length of 4.12 inches. So there you go. And a handle thickness here of 0.48 inches. And that gives us an overall length of 7.4 inches and a weight of 3 ounces. So yeah, not a tiny knife, but interesting. Let's go ahead and do maybe a couple size comparisons. So let's start with another slip joint here, the Case Mini Trapper that I've got here in this cool Patriot Kernite. Yeah, there you go. And how about the Kershaw Atmos? There you go. I think that's a pretty good comparison. And how about a big old orange rat #1? Because that's fun. And then I thought we would do something a little fun here. So this is one of my earliest knives. This was my first Boy Scout knife. I took to Boy Scout camp. It is the Kershaw Black Gulch. There you go. This knife's about 25, 30 years old. And you can see it's got some weird bubbling there on the bolsters. But yeah, actually interesting too. This is oops, sorry, bumped. Yeah, Japan. So there you go. So yeah, I know it's not a very common knife, so it probably doesn't help much with the size comparison, but I thought it was pretty neat because it was a little bit of a throwback for me. So there you go. So that's what we've got here with our Kershaw Culpepper. So let's get right into this and let's talk blade. So, like you saw, this is a pretty interesting, traditional looking type blade. In fact, I think you could argue, not to pull out this again, but you can see some similarities there, right? I mean, this is a Kershaw clip point, if I've ever seen one, and there you go. So, while this is a backlock, and I recognize that, slightly different, still kind of neat. So we've got a 7CR17 MOV blade, steel on this clip point blade with a satin finish and a flat grind, and the grind starts here and moves all the way down. Now, I didn't mention in the specs, I should have, it's super thin. So this is 0.82 inches thick, really, really thin, and so by its nature, regardless of the steel, 7CR17, it is what it is. Budget steel, extraordinaire there, but it's going to be slicey. Right? I mean, they put a pretty sharp edge on it, although we'll talk about the grind in a minute here. But yeah, it's just sort of going to be slicey by its nature. You can see, boy, it almost disappears if you hold it kind of just the right way. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a really attractive looking blade. I think they did the sharpening choil pretty darn well there. My biggest gripe and thing that sort of irritates me, let's see if you can see it, is the actual grind itself. So yeah, if you see kind of right in the middle of the blade, so sort of right here, As this grind comes down, it disappears, sort of narrows out. There's a good view of it right here. Shallows out and then fattens up again as it goes this way. It's not as pronounced on this side, but it's still similar to that. And that's just sloppy. I mean, I'm sorry. It's slopping. It was disappointing, especially for a knife that's, this isn't, they had a better grind than a 25, 30-year-old knife. And they've had better grinds on other Chinese, manufactured Kershaws. And this is a Kershaw out of China, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering. It says China right there. So yeah, that bugged me. I checked with my buddy JB over at Big Red EDC, and he got this about the same time I did. We must have both put in some orders or something. His did not have that. And so what that leads me to believe is they could be hit or miss. Maybe I just got a bum one. Maybe mine's the only one that had this weird, who knows? The guy, the person doing this grind was like, yeah, I just don't care anymore. I don't know, whatever. But maybe that's the case, but it does make you wonder a little bit when you buy this, what you're going to get if you're not going to see it in person, if you're just ordering it online like I did. So the other thing I will note about the blade, it's got some jimping up here. It's decent jimping. It's not overly, it's not just for show. I mean, it's definitely worthwhile jimping. And then it's got this, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in action, but it's got this sort of nail neck in here. And interesting to me, and I'm not a huge slip joint guy, so I may not know all of the ins and outs of slip joint terminology and whatnot. So if there is somebody watching this that's much more slip joint literate than I am, please let me know. But so on this side, the nail neck is very, very shallow, and on this side, it's much deeper and easier to catch, to get a fingernail in there and pull it out. But, so I don't know if that's common or if that's, it leads me to, my thinking is it's not, but whatever. So that's just another area where it's kind of like, how much time and attention were they putting into some of these? Now, again, and actually, I don't think I mentioned this, and I will right now while we're talking $25 here. So this is a $25 knife. So keep that in mind as it relates to any of my gripes or nitpicks or whatever, and of the things that I say that are good about it as well, because it's $25. So keep that in mind. Is that a good value for this? I don't know. We'll see, and draw your own conclusions, I guess, once we get through the rest of the review. So there you go. That's sort of where we sit with the blade. Let's talk action. So it's a, traditional slip joint type action. Noticeably missing is any sort of half stop, right? Meaning it just keeps on going and then snaps shut when it's done. And by half stop, I mean, as you pull open this case, for example, so it sort of naturally stops there and then opens up all the way. The benefit of that is if you've got your meaty old hand like mine sitting right here and then somehow you manage to close the knife, there's that little stop that keeps it from going further and, filleting my finger there. So with this one, you're definitely, especially if you're kind of doing one of these, if you're not paying attention and this comes flying shut on you, and it's a pretty snappy little action there. So I can't, I'm not going to complain too much on that level. And again, for those of you that are more versed in the slip joint, vocabulary, the walk and talk. Walk it like I talk it. Walk it like I talk it. Walk it like I talk of this. I mean, like I said, I think it's a very smooth action. I think it's got a nice snap to it, a nice spring. It came perfectly centered. I don't really have any complaints that way. But which, by the way, that's good because you're not undoing this thing because it's pin construction, but we'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, no. So there you go. I mean, like I said, with the nail nick, it's a little obnoxious that you can't get it really as much on the one side as you can on the other. But the benefit of this is, and just sort of the way they design this, you don't need to use the nail nick. You can sort of pinch it here where it's the kind of crest of the clip point starts, and you can pull it out really easily just like that. So there you go. So I think it's a fine slip joint action. I wish it had a half stop, but it doesn't. So, oh well, that's just what it is. So let's talk handles and scales. So this is a black G10. And I think actually it's done pretty darn well. I think it's pretty attractive. And it's got brass liners. So if this can focus, you probably have already noticed that. And the black and the brass is just a classy combination. I think it looks good. In fact, I think if I open this up, you might be able to get a better view. There you go. You can kind of see that brass in there. There you go. And then we've got stainless steel bolsters. So, and I think this is the only configuration, color, etc., that this comes in, at least currently. So there you go. So as I mentioned, this is pin construction. So you're not disassembling this knife without destroying it. And as it relates to fit and finish, it's done pretty well. There are a couple things. I bumped the camera again. Sorry about that. So you can kind of see right there. There's a little bit where it's like, all right. It's not. There's a little space there. You can kind of see that. But again, there's the transitions are pretty good. You can see where it meets the bolster. There's a little bit of a line. It's more on one of the sides than the other. I think it's this one maybe. Yeah, but you really don't feel much of a transition at all. So, and it's smooth in the back here. There's a little catch right here. By and large, fit and finish is pretty decent. And this case is a much more expensive knife, and it has a pretty similar feel as it relates to fit and finish. So on some level, $25, there you go. It is what it is. So carry, it's a slip joint. You can either throw it in your pocket or your little fifth pocket, I guess, although it's a pretty good sized knife, right? But with that 3.25 inch blade. But, and it's 3 ounces, so it's not totally light. But again, it's a relatively decent sized blade. It doesn't have a pocket clip, obviously. That might have been a cool thing for them to add to sort of blend that traditional and modern, but they went all traditional, and that's fine. Obviously, if you have a little slip that you want to carry it in, or a sheath or something like that, I'm sure you could get, all perfectly cool. No worries there. So, carry is relative. I don't think you're going to hang this off your keychain. I suppose you could, but I think pretty sure that's that's a lanyard hole. But yeah. So carry's pretty standard, is what it is. So where do I sit on this overall? I think for $25, this is a fun little knife. I think it's attractive. It brings me back a little bit, to what I was saying. And, I actually kind of wish Kershaw would go back more to these kind of knives. I think they're cool, big, cool part of their history. And they had fun names back in the day. Like that one's the Black Gulch. So I wish they would resurrect some of those a little bit, but I think this is a cool start. And, the Culpepper is an interesting name. It's just, like I said, I think for $25, this is a decent offering. The grind really irritates me. I wish it wasn't that way, and I know I could probably sharpen this and fix that, and but I shouldn't, even at $25, I don't feel like I should have to do that. It's just, I just don't. They've been making knives a long time. Like I said, I don't know why, anyways. But there you go. It's the Kershaw Culpepper. I think it's an interesting, traditional offering here in 2020. If you're into this sort of thing, if you're into Kershaws, if you're into slip joints, give it a peek. You're not gonna see. There you go. I slipped right off that nail because it's just there's nothing there. I went for it as a nail nick and there wasn't anything there. But yeah, apart from I've got a few gripes, a few quibbles. It is what it is for $25, but overall, I think it's a pretty fun piece, and it's, a nice little kind of throwback to some Kershaw history. So with that, I hope you found this useful, and, if you're looking at maybe picking one of these up, that this was a helpful review. And with that, stay safe out there, be mild-mannered to one another, and all the best.